Evening, everybody. I think we have a quorum. And a couple of members I know will not be with us tonight. Tizzy Lockman and Jeff Menzer will not be here. So we have a lot on the agenda, and we're lucky to have some guests with us tonight. So I wanted to get started. And just a couple of ministerial things. One is any of the written materials that we're talking about tonight, if you're online, you can get them on the Reading Consortium website, which is solutionsfordelawareschools.org. If you just go to meeting, is it meeting resources?
Yes.
Meeting resources, and you click on the Discretionary Recommendations Committee. Any documents that we're talking about tonight, they're all there and you can see them. And the only other administrative item is the first few meetings we've had, we've been pretty loose about letting the public weigh in on the discussion during the meeting instead of during the public comment section. And tonight we're gonna need to be a little bit more formal and have the public comment during the actual public comment section, just because we do have a few guests and a pretty crowded agenda. So we will, we definitely want to hear from everyone, but we'll just need to do it when we get to that part of the agenda. And similarly, we won't be monitoring the chat like we usually do. Although folks are free to use it, we just won't be monitoring it during the meeting as we usually do. So before we get to the meeting business, a couple items from the agenda. We have two sets of minutes from our August 19th and August 26th meetings, draft minutes. And again, they're also on the website. And I am hoping to get a motion to approve them. All of our meetings, by the way, are recorded and available on the website in their entirety. So in addition to the minutes, folks can go back and watch the meetings themselves. But why don't we just, if we could just do them one at a time, for the August 19th meeting minutes. Is there any changes requested to them? And if not, could we get a motion to approve them?
I'll make the motion to approve.
I'll second.
And since this is actually the first formal vote that we have had on this committee, so these minutes, we actually need to keep track of who is voting yes and no. So all in favor, if you could say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Oh, sorry. Any opposed? And any abstentions? So we have all 5 members in attendance voting yes. And then for the August 26th meeting minutes, same thing. If I can, are there any changes or additions that anyone wanted to suggest before I ask for a motion? And if not, could we get a motion to approve them?
I'll make the motion.
I'll second.
And all those in favor, if you could say aye.
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 Any opposed? And any abstentions? Great, thank you. And that's also all 5 members in attendance. And then the next set of documents are the 3 resolutions that we have talked about during the last 3 meetings, and with respect to 2 of them, actually reviewed drafts of and made comments on. So hopefully, if I did my job right, we should be approving things for the first 2 that we have already discussed and that there's some consensus on. But that's why we print them out and look at them. So the first, I'm just going to take them in chronological order of when we discussed them. So the first is the resolution on outside school time and wraparound service programs. And again, for folks online, you can also see these on the website.
And I put the link in the chat.
Great. And as with the minutes, I'll ask if there's any, if folks want to discuss this, or if not, if someone wants to move to approve the resolution.
I'd make a motion to approve the resolution as presented.
Will we get a second?
I second.
Any discussion about it? And like I said, the hope is that this reflects what we talked about at the last two meetings, but I want to be sure that that's the case.
It looks like all the changes we discussed were incorporated as far as student growth as a data point. The incremental, like premiums based on tenure. So I was pleased with it.
If there aren't other comments, then I'll pause for a second in case there are. But if not, I will ask for a vote. All those in favor of the resolution as written? Would you say aye?
Aye.
Aye. Sorry. Can't do it on mute.
I do have a question.
Okay,
Since we're talking about the pairs on the 30th, is there opportunity to add after that discussion, or is that separate?
well, that'll be a whole, if, after we've had that discussion, there will be a whole separate resolution, this one.
Okay, well, aye.
Any opposed? And any abstentions? Okay, so we have all five in attendance approving that. And the second is the resolution on recruitment and retention salary premiums for teachers in high need schools. And Tika had sent a question around, and she and I had spoken earlier today. Tika, I don't know if you wanted to suggest adding a sentence to this, or if you were comfortable with it, and you know, discussing that issue, you know, when it came back to the full, if and when it comes back to the full consortium.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes,
Okay. My apologies. I'm on my way home and I should be home in like 15 minutes and my reception is apparently in the car. But I think after our conversation, I think I'm good till we get to the next phase of where as a whole consortium we talk about it. I think it's okay to move forward, trying to run some of that, but just noting what I said and kind of talking through what that might look like going forward.
okay. And just so folks know that the question Tika had raised was that for some of these criteria that can change from year to year with a teacher, for example, if they had a national board certification, if they were rated highly effective, you know, whether that, whether the premium would change from year to year depending upon whether their status changed.
I couldn't get in. I'm
Oh,
sorry.
I'm sorry. So are there other comments or questions on this one? And if not, I'll just ask folks for a vote on sending it along. All those in favor?
We need a motion and a second.
Oh, there hasn't been a motion yet, I'm sorry. Is there a motion? Thank you, Kelly. Is there a motion to approve this resolution on salary premiums?
I'll make the motion to approve the resolution as presented.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor, if you could say aye.
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 Opposed? Abstentions? Great. All five in attendance, are, yes. And the third and final one, is the issue that we discussed last week. And as you can see, it's a lot shorter than the first two. Jeff is not here tonight. He did send me an email, which, I'll just say exactly what it says. He says, I reviewed it and it makes sense at a very high level. So, do folks have any questions or comments on this? And if not, does someone want to make a motion to approve the third?
I'm making a motion to approve.
I'll second.
All in favor, if you could say aye.
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 Opposed? Abstentions? We have all five members present voting yes, so thank you. And that is the last one and the end of that item on the agenda. I want to move on to what I hope will be a very interesting discussion, which is the body of tonight's agenda. And as you saw, we've been over the last few weeks working our way through this list of issues that the consortium asked us to look at. And the agenda for tonight is the fourth issue, which is specialized programs in the city of Wilmington schools. And my goal for tonight is to have enough of a discussion, including hearing from the public during the public comment portion, that we'd be able to put together a written resolution like the ones that we were just looking at, to be able to circulate to people and have folks be able to review and discuss and vote on something more concretely. And like with the other three resolutions, the goal here is to narrow things down, to send them to our finance subcommittee to get cost estimates, to send them to our community engagement subcommittee to get public feedback on something that's a little bit more concrete and specific. And in our assignment from the consortium, there were four types of specialized programs that we were explicitly asked to think about. Programs for students that could do accelerated academic work, programs for students with learning disabilities, programs that were focused on the arts, and programs that were focused on STEAM and STEM programming. And we were asked to answer some pretty specific questions about programs in those four areas. I think what would be helpful would be, before we start trying to talk about the questions, we're really lucky tonight that we have four guests who are kind of subject matter experts in a couple of these areas that are joining us. And I want to, and they're particularly with respect to gifted and talented programs, and with respect to programs that are targeted at helping students with learning disabilities. And what I'd like to do is to give them a chance to talk to us a little bit, and then give the committee members an opportunity to talk to them and ask questions about how it might apply to our work. Lisa Lawson is with us on Zoom, and you all probably know Lisa. She's also a member of the consortium. And yeah, as you saw in the memo that Senator Lockmon and I sent around, Brandywine School District, that she's the superintendent of, has pretty much the only school within school gifted and talented programs in the state. I asked Lisa if she would be willing to join us tonight and basically talk about the experience that Brandywine has had with the programs, what's going well, what the challenges have been, and, what she would see as pluses and minuses of trying to, implement programs, in City of Wilmington schools. So Lisa, I'm just gonna turn things over to you, and if you could, share your thoughts on those lines, I think that'd be very helpful for us as we look at this.
Sure. So I'll just give a brief, can everybody hear me okay? Because it looks like I froze. Okay. I'll just give a brief kind of synopsis of the program and then have folks ask questions because I'm not really sure, what the discussions have been. So the Gifted program has been in existence for a very long time. It's actually written into state code. It's been so long, and they continue to renew that. But it is a choice program for out-of-district students. It is self-contained, and it runs from kindergarten through 8th grade. And so the concept is that students need these services, that they are eligible for these services and need that self-contained environment based on patterns of thinking and other characteristics that are defined in Gifted that are outlined in regulations. And so we do look at that nonverbal, and that is what we weigh heavily on. The nonverbal assessment. We use the Naglieri, which is the gold standard assessment that they're using across the country to look for giftedness, but we recognize that you're not actually supposed to be screening, or most folks don't screen for gifted services until age 8 or 9 is when it's highly recommended. But because we're in such competition in the state of Delaware with choice and charter and everything else going on, we actually start the program in kindergarten and try to recruit students in. Not all stay in the program. There are conversations. There's an influx and kind of outflux, especially around kindergarten and 1st grade. But we are casting nets again at the end of 2nd grade towards 3rd grade, and then at the end of elementary school looking towards middle school. And so again, it's a needs-based program in terms of needing to learn differently, students thinking differently. They tend to have higher cognitive thinking patterns, those kinds of things. And then we're trying to supplement beyond that and have some itinerant services the way that other districts, our neighboring districts, run Gifted and Talented is typically an itinerant pull-out model, something like that. The self-contained model is very different. And so it exists in 2 elementary schools. There's 1 K-3, 4th and 5th grade is in a different elementary school, and then we run the middle school program at PS. So I guess I'll just open it to questions in terms of what people's thoughts are around other aspects I might not have mentioned.
Maybe if I could just throw you one question that's just based on sort of our assignment. I mean, the question that we're looking at is for some of the City of Wilmington schools that might be part of whatever feeder pattern, ends up, whether it would be a good idea to have school within school type gifted programs in one or more of those schools that would be, in the first instance available to the kids that were actually in the feeder pattern for the school, and then to the extent that there were vacancies available to other kids in the district who might choice in. So I guess the question is, based on your experience in Brandywine, how you size that up and what you would view as, potential challenges that we might want to be concerned about and thinking about it.
I'd say it's definitely possible. I think that's what Delaware continues to do, right? That we continue to look at, kind of niches and little specialized programs, and that's how we have so many choices. I would say one of the challenges we've run into is the certification in Delaware. So the Gifted and Talented certification has its own praxis, and there's a cut score for that. And that is not one of the ones that has been approved for multiple measures or any kind of a range. We don't have a bench, much like, on a team when you you have injured players and you have a bench of people to fill. We don't have a bench at all because Delaware doesn't entertain any kind of certification program. And in fact, we've looked in the tri-state area and they don't entertain any kind of certification program. I think Indiana is the closest one that we could find to potentially do something. And so these teachers do engage in a whole additional set of coursework and then pursue the certification. And I think the reason why it's held to such a high standard is because in other states, giftedness is combined with students who have unique needs on the opposite end of the spectrum around disability. And in other states, you get an IEP for giftedness. And so they are quite federally mandated and stringent around the certification procedures and processes. But other than that, I would say, you know, in terms of cost, it's a teacher, right? So as long as you fill the classroom with the number of students that you would fill a general education classroom, it doesn't necessarily cost you any more money to have it. Again, getting the certificated staff, and then certainly their curricular materials are different in many cases than the materials that we're using in general education classes. Sometimes they are, they're very project-based, and so they follow things a little differently and off grade level for sure.
Lisa, I do have a question. How many classes do you have per school?
So we start with kindergarten at 2 classes, and then at first grade we expand to 3 because we're inviting more students in, so that those 3 classes stay in Mount Pleasant Elementary for first, second, and third. And then by the time they get to Claymont, 4th and 5th, the class sizes are up to about 27, 28. So we don't have space at Claymont to, you know, even if we wanted to add a 4th classroom because it was a little tight. So we're trying to look at our needs across the next 3 to 5 years and decide what to do, whether we should be expanding a little bit wider. But right now we need to find someplace else besides Claymont because they're up to about 900 elementary school kids. So we're a little tight there. We have plenty of space at MPE, and then PS is our 6th to 8th grade program, and we have room for growth there as well. But we run, I think, about 3 sections for each grade level.
That sounds good. So, just for clarification, so each school had. So I'm sorry, not all your schools have the gifted program. So how do you guys? So do they have the choice to go to the school that the gifted program is in if they're eligible to come?
So there's an assessment process. Like I said, we switched to the Naglieri, so it's a nonverbal assessment process. And then as you get older, we used to do something called panel reviews, but we're phasing those to more of a, we have a thing called morning of activities for Brandywine where kids come and solve problems and we see how they think and their patterns and those kinds of things. But anyway, it's kind of, I guess you would liken it to an audition of some sort, but they participate in an event. And so the choice piece is done on the back end. So everybody gets an opportunity to be screened. We screen every single kindergartner that exists in the district, and then we accept choice applications from out of district, and those children get screened. And so we treat it within the choice process, but the choice goes on the back end after the screening process. And so we're consistently trying to continue screening to see if there's anybody we've missed along the way. And we changed to the Naglieri because it is not language based. The fact that it just looks at thinking patterns, and it's an assessment you take on the iPad. We're trying to widen the opportunity and access for underrepresented populations and then just all populations. So it's without language.
Okay, thank you.
Lisa, the students that live within the district, I believe, and they're still choicing there, they get busing. But do students that live outside of the district that choice in, do they get busing? And would that possibly be a cost that we might want to consider?
Yeah, so I don't think anybody crosses district lines ever unless it's MV, right? I mean, I think that's a rule that everybody follows. You're absolutely right that the busing for gifted was originally put in the regulation and is afforded. And so out of district families would just have to find the closest bus stop to closest Brandywine bus stop. Because yes, I don't think any buses cross feeder pattern lines of other districts unless we're talking about a student who is MV or foster care.
And the other thing that I thought of maybe a cost for, so I know you mentioned some of the curriculum items, but do they take additional like field trips or things like that that might be some higher price tags, especially if it required buses or something like that?
Not anything that's out of, I would say, local expenditure. It's more of a project-based learning. And again, it's often at an accelerated pace, and it's off grade level. But I wouldn't say that the expenditures would something that would make or break a district in and around the field trips or curricular aspects.
Okay, thank you.
Lisa, you talked about the I think you called it universal screening.
Mhm.
Could you just explain how that is different from how some other gifted programs do their screening and why you decided to do it that way?
Yeah, I'll explain how we used to have ours. So we were using the Dial 4, which is actually a developmental delay screener. And then we were having kids sit with a school psychologist for a full-on IQ test that was cumbersome, really not age appropriate, and tended to not really provide full access and opportunity because there's language in those assessments. And so we shifted to the Naglieri after attending the national conference and talking to Dr. Naglieri himself. We had several staff members out there. So we really rely heavily on the nonverbal assessment. There is a verbal and a quantitative measure that we do too, in case students are showing giftedness in those areas and potentially not the nonverbal area. So we look at all three, and then we take the higher end kind of cut scores, so to speak, but then make sure that we cast the net several other times, not only with the screening measure, but with the morning of activities that I had mentioned before, where gifted teachers will set up problem-based circumstances in a room, and the children will come in and problem solve and work together and those kinds of things. So there's other kinds of, again, opportunities besides a test per se on an iPad to show that the giftedness services that you may need or require.
I have one other question, but I don't want to interrupt if other folks on the committee had questions. All right, Lisa, I didn't warn you I was going to ask you this, so feel free to say you'd rather not say. And I'm not going to ask this question of our other guests because they haven't been able to be at the Reading Consortium meetings, but sort of the big picture of what we're doing or trying to do. I mean, do you feel like something like this would be a good addition? If we did go forward and there was an opportunity to have more of these types of school within school gifted programs, and do you think that would be a positive, or like I said, you can also say that you withhold judgment?
No, I mean, I think anytime you create a specialized program that attracts, right, people to that specialization for their particular child. I mean, I think that's what's happened in Delaware. As I said before, I think we have a lot of choices. So I think that the only program within a program that we discussed, I think that would be hard to start, given the considerations around the Reading Consortium, is IB. Because we are one of the last districts where the International Baccalaureate program allows you to be a school within a school. They really want whole school International Baccalaureate from kind of here forward. I know that any new program startup, they won't allow the school within a school. So we have our share of challenges around being an IB school at Tally and Mount within a school. We work through those with the program program, and that is a bit of a costly program for sure to maintain. So there would be some additional dollars, but you and I also discussed potentially like, a program for students with unique learning needs, unique, disabilities, something like that, specialization within schools. I think have taken off a little bit, especially for some of the traditional districts that have to do some things differently, right, in order to retain kiddos.
Well, thank you, Lisa. And by the way, if you're able to stick around, I know that in a prior life you were the head of special education for Brandywine also. So the next thing we're talking about is something that you probably also know something about. But if you do have to run, we really appreciate your time. And for the benefit of the committee, I have a feeling that we will not finish talking about this at this meeting. And to the point where we'd be ready to put together a final resolution. So I think just so that people don't feel rushed, I think what I'm going to suggest is that we've already got an agenda for a week from today, and I'm going to suggest that if we don't finish today, I'll pick this back up 2 weeks from today and basically move our other meetings out by a week. So we would have, one additional meeting on October 6th or whatever the next Tuesday after the 30th is. So if we finish today, great, but I don't want people to feel like they have to rush through things.
To that point, Matt, I think it might be helpful for us to maybe hear from Shelley Suchi, who's come to many of our other meetings and given a lot of feedback, but she's the tag teacher for Christina School District, and she's
Sure.
based out of Pritchett. So I think, and their model is a little bit different than what Lisa just described too. So I think as a city school running a gifted and talented program, I'm sure she has feedback.
Yeah, well, I'll send something around in writing to remind people, but please invite her to the meeting 2 weeks from now.
Okay, thanks.
So I mentioned we have 3 other guests, and what I was going to ask them about is something that's maybe a little bit more challenging to talk about, in that with gifted programs, and you probably saw this in the memo that Senator Lockwood and I sent around. There are lots of school within school gifted programs around the country, and it's a pretty well established model. With school within school programs that are focused on kids with learning disabilities, there's not a lot of examples to look at. There are definitely group pullouts where students are taught separately and in groups for particular subjects depending upon their IEPs, but not much that looks like a formal school within a school program. So we have 3 folks here who have been very involved with educating kids with learning disabilities and specifically kids with language-based learning disabilities. And they're all here with us, and I just wanted to introduce them, thank them for being here. Allie Williams is the current head of school at Pilot School in Wilmington. And Caroline O'Neill is the head of Reading Assist, which is a nonprofit in Delaware that services a large number of schools and has a focus on kids with, is it fair to say, a focus on kids with language-based learning disabilities? And Kathy Craven is the former head of Pilot School and is currently on the board of trustees still at Nativity Prep. Yes. At Nativity Prep School. And full disclosure, one of my kids went to Pilot School. So what I asked them to come talk to us about and hopefully be able to ask questions is, like I said, this would be something different for Delaware. I'll put my opinion out front, which is that I would love for kids in the feeder patterns for some of these schools in the city to have access to some of the type and quality of education that kids who attend private school programs or who have the benefit of reading assist that kids with disabilities currently have. I would love for that to be more widely available to kids in the feeder patterns for some of these city schools or kids who might choice in if there were vacancies available. But because it would be something new, I definitely thought it was worth talking about. Whether it could work, what it might look like, things that we might want to be mindful of if we tried to do it. So I guess I would, in no particular order necessarily, just toss it to the three of you and just sort of ask, you know, knowing what we're talking about, is something like that potentially doable? And if so, you know, what do you think it might need to look like to be successful?
I'm happy to go first, and thanks to everyone online. I work in schools, so brought handouts, and I'll leave them to you, and I can give them to you digitally. So I apologize to everyone online that you guys can look at them, that can't look at this. But what I tried to outline is what the kind of major components of the program are at Pilot. And without being overly presumptuous, really just try to think about your questions, like, is this possible? Is this scalable? Where's the route going to be? And recognizing that Pilot as an independent organization is able to be more nimble perhaps than schools that have to function within larger systems can be. A couple of, I think, key components. We have a very small student to teacher ratio, which I think is the first thing that people often think about. I actually think it's not the number one thing that makes the difference. I think the big differences are we really dedicate full throttle to the science of learning, specifically the science of reading first, but it's beyond just a kind of evidence-based phonics reading system. We are aggressively progress monitoring every single one of our students, and we meet daily as a teaching body, but each student is talked about weekly. Their progress is assessed, and we change the program on a week by week basis if that's what it calls for. And so there's no stagnation, there's no languishing, and we ask the question, is the program working, with such frequency that students can't fall through the cracks. And we look at the perfect edge, right? We don't want a student to be under challenged or over challenged. And I think that is, I'll just offer up kind of what we do, and I will let those of you who function within public school systems and for you to kind of anticipate the roadblocks, but that ongoing assessment and adjustment of programming, I think, is a hallmark. And then the other kind of two pieces are integrated therapies and integrated executive functioning support. So the integrated therapies, we have speech and language pathologists, occupational therapists, and physical therapists on staff. And 100% of our students receive therapy through class level supports as a kind of starting point. So 100% of our students receive handwriting instruction, fine motor and gross motor warm-ups at the start of their day, led by occupational therapists, regardless of their therapeutic qualifications, because all students are growing, developing children. And so all students benefit from the presence of occupational therapy. And our teachers learn alongside the occupational therapists, and so they begin to integrate that therapeutic best practice into their math classes, their reading classes, their PE classes, whatever. And so occupational therapists also see students directly. They see them in one-on-one, small group, pull in, push out, and then kind of group themed classes, sensory group, low tone group, that kind of thing, embedded into their schedule. But that kind of low threshold, non-existent threshold for that immediate kind of baseline therapeutic integration, but really low threshold and having therapists as part of the faculty, I think, is a really big game changer. Our speech pathologists teach a language class to 100% of our students. So social pragmatic language, expressive and receptive language skills, writing skills taught by a speech and language pathologist for our middle school students. 100% of our students receive that therapeutic service. And so we remove the threshold. I think that's a, that would be a hurdle, that would be a rub. But it's absolutely possible. I think that a lot of this is about reimagining or asking, do roadblocks have to be roadblocks? I, I also just understand that, certain bureaucracies are there for protective purposes, and so, I just want to kind of explain our program and then leave the will this work? I don't know that I'm the right person to answer that question. To just kind of sum up, I would say, really great programming backed by the science of learning. So that's about choosing the right curriculum, training the faculty appropriately, and then that ongoing assessment and adjustment, and then integrated therapies. And then the final one is integrated executive functioning. That's really hard to do consistently. We have a school-wide adopted executive functioning framework. All of our students use the exact same organizational methods. All of our students are trained to mentally and physically transition into a class and out of a class and monitor physical and mental transitions throughout the day. Our students from kindergarten to 8th grade have a high school-like schedule, an individualized schedule with different teachers for every single subject. They're rearranging, and 65% of the kids have ADHD. They don't transition well, and yet we embed these executive functioning supports across our front office, our operations people, our facilities people. Everyone knows our executive functioning scheme, so that anyone can stop a little guy in the hallway and help them get where they need to go and say, I don't see your red binder. Where is your, the kind of hallmarks of our program? Because we notice that inconsistency, once one kind of loose thread with executive functioning happens, everything tumbles. That's another thing that I said 65% of our kids have ADHD, 100% of our kids benefit from the executive functioning strategies. So to put a final kind of point on this question, the school within a school model, Pilot is of course a school for kids with learning differences, and we welcome a plurality of learning differences. So the interventions for a kid with dyslexia look different than the intervention for a kid with a math LD, look different than a kid with a developmental delay and a kid with ADHD. And yet, what we try to do is take away thresholds and qualifications and offer universal support that all developing learning children will thrive under, and try to systematize that. And that, I think, is scalable. I definitely think that it is a reimagining. But I think that, our students need the kind of education that they get at Pilot, but also students would benefit from that kind of education.
Thank you.
That's helpful, yeah.
Maybe I'll go in clockwise order, and Caroline, I know that you do a fair amount of your work in the traditional public schools, so maybe if you could, also talk, aside from what you all do, talk about how you might see, some of these things working in the context of a traditional school.
Super, and I'll share a little bit of context around our work, although I know many of our partners and folks are familiar with our work here in the room. So we provide high quality, high dosage tutoring to students with language-based learning disabilities. We don't necessarily require a diagnostic to be able to be assigned to us. We just look for anyone that's struggling sort of below or significantly below the cut point for risk on screeners between the ages of kindergarten and 3rd grade. Our tutors are unique in that they are highly trained. We have an accredited structured literacy training program, so we don't work with all learning disabilities. We focus on structured literacy and early intervention and early supports. We focus on that as an organization. Many of you probably already know the statistic that 95% of students can learn how to read by the end of 1st grade with proper instruction. So we really focus on getting students who may be struggling, who may have dyslexia, that qualified high quality intervention support early enough so that they can reach the benchmark they need to be in order to be successful in their schooling. Our tutors are typically AmeriCorps members, which means it is heavily subsidized for the schools, which makes it a sustainable partnership in a lot of ways with schools. I know Jeff isn't here, but Colonial was the very first school to pilot this model with us in 2015, and they're our current partner. So I know that ESSER funding brought a lot of tutoring to schools, but our first partner was pre and post ESSER, just to kind of give you a sense of how our model works. Our tutors come from the community in which their students are being served. A lot of people don't know this because they tend to think that AmeriCorps is something that you do fresh out of college. Over 40% of our 120 tutors last year were over the age of 50. We have tons of grandmas, parents that are coming back into the workforce, that are working and serving in schools, getting students to reading benchmarks within just one school year. There's a cool fun thing. If you're an AmeriCorps member and you're over 55, you can actually gift your Ed Award, which is about $5,000, to your kids, to your grandkids. So there's a lot of work here in this building up of the community by providing job opportunities, workforce opportunities, and also education opportunities for folks within the community. The program itself works typically in a pullout. We embed the tutors within schools, all types of schools. We work with charters, with districts, with dual language schools, Montessori schools. We've got parochial schools. We work to give you a sense of scale. We have about 55 different elementary school partners across Delaware, Washington, D.C., and Pennsylvania. So we have experience sort of working with different models and being nimble, as you would say, as a nonprofit. We have a little bit of that flexibility to be nimble and pilot and experiment. The other thing that, as my team and I were thinking about this and what might it look like as a school within a school, we sort of think of the needs within a school as being three-pronged. You've got obviously the needs of the students who are struggling to read. Delaware has a literacy crisis, and we know that getting students to read by third grade greatly improves their outcomes. We also know with proper instruction, structured literacy, aka science and reading-based instruction, they will get to those goals. So you've got that direct support that needs to happen to the students across your tiers of instruction. But unfortunately, we also need to serve the educators within the schools. Many educators, all of their own, just didn't have great training in a structured literacy program. They just don't have access to either their training because their educator prep program didn't prepare them, or they don't quite have the materials or the diagnostic supports, right, within their own school. So there's a piece of sort of educator support and capacity building that we do, and we think could be really interesting to explore if you're looking at a school within a school model. And then the third prong is the parents and the families themselves, especially when we're working within communities where there may have been generations of low literacy rates. Oftentimes parents are doing what they think is absolutely best, which is putting their kid in the public school, expecting that child is going to learn how to read. And when they're not getting there, they're not sure what resources are available. How do they advocate? How do they really understand and interpret the IEPs that a student may or may not be placed in? How do they advocate for their child? So we really think a school within a school has multiple avenues of support. Obviously, we have lots of experience in terms of providing direct student supports for kids that want to learn and need to learn how to read. But there's also a piece of building that capacity in the school so that hopefully it isn't always necessary that you have so many students that need intervention. And of course, building up the community, ensuring that parents know what's happening, know how they can support at home. Although, it's very fair and expected that a child learns how to read in school. We're not asking parents to teach their kids how to read, but for them to understand what's happening, support what's happening in the school, and be able to be strong advocates for their children in the school. So we were very excited about the concept and love to think about how we could support and grow that. I'll share sort of how we think about our work or what we do, and where we would address sort of thinking about the needs.
Thank you.
Sorry, one other thing I should say, because I forget this is an important part of our model, something that I think is interesting to think about when you think about sustainability. Staffing is always such a challenge, right? We're already facing a teacher shortage here in Delaware and nationwide. We have started, we formed a partnership a couple of years ago with Wilmington University and with Howard High School to create teacher pathways, in which we create like a residency program where folks could spend a year tutoring with us and then do a year residency while jointly enrolled in WilmU. Their experience tutoring children is recognized for 4 graduate level courses, which allows them to have like an accelerated graduate program. So in 2 years, they're able to go from a bachelor's degree to a teaching certificate, a master's in special education. And if they stay in Delaware as teachers, that master's degree is then free. So they're able to earn while sort of transitioning into teachers. I share that model. I love it. I'm proud of it, and want more people to sign up for it. But also as a way for us to think about sustainability in staffing schools within schools. Can you look at your residency programs, your teacher pipeline, your teacher pathways as a way to create sustainability to that model?
Thanks. And Kathy Creighton.
Yes, hello, everyone. Thank you for listening to all of us. When I listen to Ally and Caroline, I think of the best and quality. I spent 43 years in the field of special ed, 20 years as the head of Pilot. One of my visions developed because at that time, Pilot had a socioeconomic profile of a public school classroom. And I grew up in the public system. I had an excellent education. And I think there's a size and a place for everybody. So my vision in looking at the children who did not have the funds to attend, but who desperately needed the programs, was maybe it's an unrealistic vision, maybe it's a crazy vision, but I did meet with the superintendents of Colonial, Appoquinimink, and I met with some of the staff and people who had a lot to do with education at Brandywine. My thought was an incubator. Instead of starting something so big that it's top heavy and cumbersome and very, very visible in these growing years, my thought was start with a class and a team, a pilot and a district teacher, and have a classroom of children who would qualify as having reading problems. And most likely, if they have reading problems, they're going to have some basement or foundation type problems in speech or language or auditory perception, but have them evaluated thoroughly and perhaps start in first grade, second grade with letter recognition, beginning reading skills, beginning some of the language skills and occupational therapy goals that are needed for success. Have them evaluated and have a team of a teacher, a pilot, and a district teacher in a classroom, and work together with a program that is flexible for each child and constantly evaluate them appropriately, not constantly, but evaluate their response and nip and tuck the programs as that particular child needs. And if there are kinks and glitches, which of course there would be, work them out in a smaller setting. And then if that works, then apply it to a second or a third classroom. But basically it starts small, have a team of dedicated people and see where it goes. There were a number of people very interested in that thought. However, some of the I don't know whether people felt threatened or whether they thought Pilot was just a school for rich kids, which it is not. But it didn't really get traction. And I was involved with building a school and all those things, and it just kind of got left. But I was excited when Matt contacted me because I don't know whether it's a viable way to look at it or not, but I'm thinking quiet, small, incubate it, see what happens. And with the positives that can happen to the children, hopefully they could return to their normal, regular classrooms and not be a setting where they stay constantly throughout school. But the goal would be to return them to regular ed with skills that they can apply and be independent. So just some crazy thoughts.
Thank you, all three of you. And I guess I would open it up to the committee members either to ask questions or to share their own thoughts on this facet of it.
I just thank you so much. I learned so much from from all three of you. But knowing a little bit more about the pilot school, I mean, I hear what you're saying as far as Ally, when you say that maybe it can't be duplicated, but I think there's a lot to gain. You know, I say the same thing when people come to our school to learn about our model. We're a dual language immersion school, so English and Spanish are just blended, and it's hard to duplicate that in a school that doesn't have that full immersion. So I understand exactly your perspective, but there's still things to be gained. And so I love the fact that you gave us sort of a better perspective on how you integrate, like especially occupational therapy, and the integrating the executive functioning supports, I think is amazing, and I think that can be replicated. And then reading assist, like I said in the chat, love you guys. I mean, you guys, I wish that you could just continue to just grow the number of tutors that you have, but the work that you do in our schools is just amazing, the high dosage tutoring. So thank you for that partnership. And I do want to learn more about the partnership that you mentioned with WilmU and Howard High School, and how we could, any of those ideas of how we can strengthen the pipeline of future teachers, I think is something that we need to consider expanding. But thank you so much.
Andrew, I saw this.
Oh no, I do agree with everything she just said, but I think we just have a lot of challenges, right? We have challenges now. I think it's very worth and deserving of our children. Um, and I think with trying to implement that and even going into even the process of implementing some of those things will show how much we really do need to work. You know what I mean? Like where we need to get to, especially when it comes to special needs. I mean, it it all sounds great in a perfect world, but we don't have the staffing to do it right. So most of our OTs and most of our therapists, occupational therapists, physical therapists, um, assist more than one school. So even when you try to make a schedule, that doesn't work. So we really need to think about um, retention and gaining employment in the special needs field, and not just going for special need teachers, but special needs support. Um, Making it more bigger. Our special need pairs need more training on special needs, and they need more lead ways to get certifications for special needs, so we can implement them and us into the classroom. Um, Once again, I think it's great to implement, but I really just think we need to think about where we are and what we need to do to get to that point. And realizing how much work that's going to take, which is totally worth it. But I really think that's going to take a lot of togetherness from the top and pushing it down to where it needs to go. And it's going to take a lot of follow up on our part to make sure it's happening. So that's my spiel, but I think it's great.
I think I've been fortunate enough to work in several city schools and districts that have programs within them similar to what Pilot described. But I think there was two key differences to me as to when you talk about scaling it up, why they're not able to be at a level of what Pilot is. And one of them is pacing, because you had mentioned kind of taking cues from where the student is or how they're picking up the lesson as to which direction you're kind of going next. And our schools are often, their curriculum is decided at a district level, and there's pacing and all that sort of set. So it does limit that some. And the other thing that I had mentioned was the class sizes, and that we don't even have physical space to break class sizes down or to have them as small as that and then have the staff do it. But to that point, the things that you mentioned about having that integrated program, having data collected daily, having weekly meetings, talking about that, those things are completely doable, and they definitely do lend to student success.
And then I think that even intertwines, that would bring us back to us even asking for more money for our teachers, because that means that they're spending more time outside of the classroom to prepare. And they already don't get overtime, and they already spending an hour or two after class. And for order for them to prepare for that type of high quality learning, they need more time. And I can pretty much tell you right now that some of them it's not even getting the 45 minutes, hour planning time that they're required to have. Paris is not getting nothing. So once again, we just got to look at some challenges that we have, and are we really willing to go to bat about it?
I think I'll just chime in just because I saw everybody else's viewed on it, at least for a moment. I think hearing what Kendra and Tika shared in particular, that what Kathy said about starting small is very on point. Because we can recommend that all these things that we just voted on earlier in the meeting involve, spending money. So we could give one of these schools or two of these schools money to hire an additional person in this area, hire an additional person in that area. But I know that hiring specialists is difficult, period. And I wouldn't want us to get into a situation where we started up something that was big and ambitious, only to find out that we literally couldn't hire the number of people that we would need to staff it the way that it needs to be staffed. So the idea of starting something small, but both for purposes of perfecting the program, but just also for purposes of being confident about being able to staff it right, I think is a helpful suggestion.
Offer a couple of thoughts. One of the questions that you had sent us ahead of time was how would we go about guessing a cost of something like this? So Pilot's cost per pupil is a little less than $40,000, which is greater than what greater than what you spend on cost per pupil in Delaware, except for in schools like Bush, where it's greater. It's like 50,000 and change cost per pupil. So, Bush is an aggressive interventional, absolutely fabulous program, but you can have Bush level outcomes. Pilot is able to have Bush level outcomes at a cheaper price. I do think that, like, from my vantage point, I think the obstacles are more about change management than they are about I don't see it as impossible. I see maybe there would have to be a willingness to disengage from a lot of the typical processes that surround special education right now. And I don't know if that's possible at all, but if a school could be built where parents agree to disengage from the typical IEP process and engage in a pilot, and I mean that small P pilot program, you know, a experimental program where they're not going to have an IEP that counts and checks in at fall and spring, and are instead, you know, kind of waiving that and instead opting into a more constant progress monitoring, the ongoing assessment and adjustment, and a willingness to, you know, change those kinds of things. I think that, you know, you can get more pipes flowing that way. The other thing, Kendra brought up about OTs being, itinerant positions in the district is, most of our OTs that come to Pilot come from public districts and they get paid more in public districts than they do at Pilot. But one of the reasons they come is because they do get to stay in one building throughout the day. And their caseloads are actually quite enormous. You know, they serve all of our students, 150 kids technically on their caseload, except that because they're servicing them through classes instead of one-on-one, and because we have reduced some of the red tape around reporting, again, I don't know what's possible, but it starts to become a possible position and the program starts to kind of self-realize. So I don't know what's negotiable and what's absolutely, fixed, but I think that if there is any wiggle room around some of the bureaucratic roadblocks, I actually think that that's like, you could just get a lot of success if you could break through some of those.
Just a quick follow-up, and I'll toss to Caroline. Is there a number for sort of what is, you know, for a, I don't want to say typical, because there is no typical student, but you had mentioned the cost per student. Is there a number that, you know, that is a typical cost per student number for a student with a language-based learning disability?
I wouldn't know that. I actually tried to look up what the cost per student in Delaware was for the students with special ed services, but my understanding from short research is that 20 to 25,000 is kind of the base price per pupil, and then cost per pupil, and then there's some like leveling up, and I struggled to find an exact number.
Okay.
But the somewhere between 35 and 45,000 is what is typical in independent schools. And I think that there's, on the one hand, I think it's a wash. There are some things that districts have an economy of scale that helps them, and on the other hand, you tend to pay your teachers and therapists more than private schools, so that hurts. But I think ultimately it could at least be a good proxy as a discussion. Yeah.
Thanks. Caroline?
You know, I want to build on this idea of starting small and starting with a pilot, and also recognize, I think it was Kendra's comment around the capacity challenges that our educators are facing in terms of preparing. And what I sense is, you know, adding is adding, right? And that is a challenge in some cases when you're working with schools and teachers who are, and oftentimes at capacity. I want to share something that we did with another one of our charter schools, and we're working on with the district here in Delaware, is to think about how do we add capacity to our schools. We know that just in the space of learning to read and literacy, that not every student should require a tutor. If we taught, often if you talk to dyslexia advocates, they'll say, if you teach every child the way you teach a dyslexic child, then they're all going to learn how to read, or a good percentage, all but a very, very small percentage are going to need that additional support. So if we look at how can we increase that knowledge, that capability, so that tier 1, that tier 2, the whole capacity of the school is working in that direction, and that without it being additive to schools and not asking the teachers to do more, right, or cost to do more. So this is something that keeps us up at night as an organization. This is a solvable problem. Barbara Bush has named it as the most solvable problem of our generation. We can fix this, and we see it. We see it working when we have students who, you know, are in third grade and can't spell their own name, and at the end of the year they're reading. So we know this is fixable, but how do we fix it at scale for an entire school and entire population? And there, we started to do some work, and this is what got me thinking, you know, of this idea of start small and grow out, and kind of thinking classroom to classroom. We actually embedded one of our certified dyslexia practitioners, one of our trainers, in one of our partner schools. So instead of us bringing in outside tutoring, we insourced that training. So we used existing school staff, we upskilled their knowledge and their training, their materials, but not just the training, but the ongoing support. Because another thing for a teacher, a training that they do in August, and then they're faced with 35 kids in front of them that they've got to remember, and then there's competing priorities. But to have somebody then in the school that's saying, hey, let's go check in on that every single week, looking at the data, monitoring the data that you said you progress monitor on a regular basis, you're checking in on that data. That needs to be embedded in a school so that a teacher feels supported throughout that entire thing, throughout the entire school year, as opposed to now saying to teachers, all right, you've got one more assessment that you need to do and you need to analyze and put on the dashboard. So there may be, if we think about our school within a school, not just to sort of, let's pull out the students and send them someplace else and add new teachers and add more, but actually using and working within the existing teaching, the existing infrastructure, and building up, and at the same time bringing in folks that can work with those students who are the most struggling, who need that immediate support, so that you're reducing the caseloads on classroom teachers. Just maybe a way of thinking about it.
And how does it also align with the state's current literacy approach as well? And how can we help?
Yeah, I think we'll learn more about that. I think there's some launch on that, but in the moments when we had Secretary Martin came and visited a couple of our different schools, and I won't speak for her, but I will say, you know, there was alignment in realizing that our literacy crisis does need to address tier 1, tier 2 instruction, you know, in order for us to get out of the space that we're in.
Is written assist in every city school?
No, you know, and I think you know, the way we work right now is we contract year by year, district by district, principal by principal. The way they work, I should say, in Delaware. Different states operate differently and have structures in place to provide vetting, funding, and resources directly to schools. But here we go school by school, and we're in many, but not all. We're in this one. We're in Eastside. But we're many.
So I know y'all work with the WLC. So are you at the WLC schools?
Yeah, so we work with Fred Clay. We have worked with Christy in the past, and so working out this year. We have worked with some Brandywine schools in the past. Yeah, and we've worked with Dr. Burgos on some summer programming, but most of, you know, our work with the WLC goes still through the schools. The schools request us, and then they work with the WLC, finding funding and support.
That's good to know. Thank you.
So what I'd like to do is, oh, I'm sorry, Stephanie.
Thanks. Hi. I just wanted to know, Matt, this is not the last time we're going to be talking about this, right? Because
Correct.
I've really appreciated all of the presentations by our guests tonight, but I really need time to kind of like sit and steep with it because, you know, Kendra brought up and Tika brought up some of the capacity challenges and the staffing challenges. And I'm sorry, the first presenter on the pilot school, she talked about the idea of, you know, what it would be if we were able to kind of really push the boundaries of what we're doing right now. So I would really love the time to kind of sit and think about, you know, if we were able to take away this boundary and put this part of the program in, what would that look like? But I don't know that I can do that right now tonight. You know what I mean? I would love
My
to have some more time to
come
kind of.
back to it
Okay,
in
good.
2 Yeah, no,
You said 2 weeks?
in 2 weeks.
Okay.
Yeah, we already posted the agenda for next week, so my hope would be that we would come back to it in 2 weeks, because we won't end up having time tonight to really talk about it in that much as a committee, and that's putting aside the issue that you talked about, that you'd like to have some time just to think about it. So yes, I absolutely agree.
Okay, and if we had further questions for any of our guests, could we just kind of shuttle them through who to get to answers?
Yeah, I can pass around my contact too.
Yeah, or,
Okay.
I mean, the best thing probably would be to send them to Elena,
Okay,
who staffs the committee, and that way she can, because I'd like to make sure that everything's, you know, that everybody sees everything, so that
no, that
way.
works for me. I appreciate it. Okay, thank you.
So if we could, what I'd like to do is to jump to the public comment part, because I know that there's at least a couple folks, I don't know if they want to comment or not, but there's a couple members of the public at least who are here and who have, you know, some of their own background in this area, and I would love to be able to hear from them with enough time left in the meeting, so that, you know, while we have our guests here, if there was anything that they had to offer that it would be helpful to hear from our guests, that we could do that. So if we could jump to public comment, and Bill, I don't know if you were. Okay, just because, we'll start with Bill because he's here, and then we can go to folks online, but I'll turn it over to Bill Doolittle.
Okay, so Bill Doolittle, I'm a volunteer advocate for children with disabilities and other children at risk. Full disclosure, I have a twice exceptional son who did 8 through 12 at Centerville Layton and is now a UD graduate, so been through the mill. I'd like to thank you for all the best practices. These aren't new or surprising things to anybody in the field. It's just that we don't do them exactly. And I'll say that as far as the IEP systems, what we do in Delaware is a checkbox system. That's not how IEP processing individualization is supposed to work. So don't feel like what we do in Delaware is the right way. It's not. If you read Andrew, it's very clear it's not. So I sort of wanted to go to what programs, since that was sort of the core question. And I'm always a little nervous about programs, because in Delaware, programs means segregated. This is not segregated. This is a more broad look at that. So I'll say, what I really see for the Wilmington schools is that the intersectionality between disability, trauma, poverty, discrimination, and language barriers has to be addressed holistically. You can't do one without the other, because they are all interwoven. And just ideas around that, you know, need continuing education support, coaching, leader support around that facility of that intersectionality. It takes additional time. You've heard that, you know. You don't address this in the same amount of time you do a student who doesn't have that type of complexity. Expanded learning. A lot of our kids, it's going to take them more time to do things. So extended learning opportunities before, after, weekend, vacation, summer, whatever. I mean, Matt, you know, the extended reading opportunities you provide. So, you know, it takes that, and it has to be done with fidelity. Right now, it tends to be more of a checkbox. If they were doing in the summer what you're doing, we'd have a real change. Right now, it's, you know, teachers doing the best they can with the knowledge they have. This is what they have. It just isn't here. You know, effective inclusive practices, you know, some of the challenges are the federal law is very strong about inclusion. But in most cases, it can be over time done inclusively. It's not administrative, you know. You know, behavior supports are always important for every kid. You know, and again, that's our tier 1 could be a lot stronger than it is in that area in Delaware. But we don't fund any of that anyway. So, effective and intensive family engagement. You have to do your best to bring the families in. Delaware spends $8,000 on family engagement. Laws pay.
Yes.
And an appropriate physical plan. Our schools were all built before the days of inclusion, or even now, as we build new ones, we've never updated our school formula for inclusion. Yes. It's been worked on, but it's never been a problem. We have to have schools that have the right physical plant facility to do it well, to individualize. Such a big person about every child needs to have their education individualized. That's whether you have a disability or not. So just some broad thoughts.
Thank you, Bill.
I'm sorry, could I ask Mr. Doolittle a question? I didn't hear the last part of what you said when you talked about Delaware spending $8,000 on family engagement. Could you just repeat your comments around that, please? I'm sorry, I missed it.
Yeah, that's actually, I think it got raised to 10,000 last year. That's what they fund our parent information training center. $10,000. Other than that, there's no line item. Districts do more, but the state has never taken parent engagement seriously, and it's the best dollars you spend. It's the new home improvement.
Thank you.
I totally agree. I got a parent engagement series right now that I'm having trouble funding. And it's funny because people always ask me to do it, but when I ask them for money to support it, they look at me like I'm crazy. And I just look like, well, am I supposed to support this myself? And it's always a situation when it comes to funding, when you're funding a parent engagement, anything. That's just all I'm gonna say. And that's whoever you ask for funding. It's ask that person, or that person has the money, or that person has funding for this, oh, that person has funding for family engagement. But then you get to that person, they say, well, that person has it. So it's never an easy thing to do, but it's something that's wanted, but not supported.
Thanks, Kendra. I see Mike Matthews has his hand up for public comment.
Hey, how are you, everyone? I am Mike Matthews. I am a teacher in the Red Clay School District at the Cab Calloway School of the Arts. Thank you for holding this meeting. I'm multitasking, cooking dinner, and taking care of 2 Boston Terriers tonight. So I'm going to step out on the deck. Thank you for all of this, and thank you, Matt, for inviting me to this meeting. I heard so many great things tonight that I feel like in ways systemically we are so behind in Delaware. And I just want to share my story really quick. I am a special education case manager at the Cab Calloway School of the Arts. When I started there 5 years ago, we had only about 40 to 45 students with IEPs. This is a school where people in the community would say to me, that's Cab. My kid has an IEP. They can't go there, can they? And I say to them, school choice is open to every resident in Delaware. You can apply. We are a public school. We take students with IEPs. And I don't know if the word has gotten out in recent years, but we are over 100 this year. In 5 years, we have increased our students with IEPs exponentially, and our staffing has grown. The supports have grown in our school. But I'm still at a school, and this is typical across the state of Delaware, where you walk into a classroom, particularly at the secondary level, where you have 35 students in an English class. You may have a dual certified teacher who is taking care of every need in that class, and they are overwhelmed. When I heard the representatives from the pilot school just now say that they do progress monitoring like every day or every few days, and then they make quick adjustments to what they're doing if it's not working. I said, yes, that is the world I want to live in. That is the world I try to live in. This year, I am no longer teaching English. I am a sole case manager at the school where I get to work one-on-one in small groups, check in with students, and I find this case management model is what I'm calling it. I think it needs to be replicated. It needs to be funded. I have more time with students. I'm able to meet their needs. I am in love with this idea of a school within a school where we can provide all of these supports. And I am excited to have heard this. And I'm just going to say it all comes down to the funding. And the pilot school shared average, I guess, 40,000 is the tuition. The average tuition in our public schools is about 20,000. It's obviously higher when you're working with students with special needs. We're in a tough place in society right now when people are upset that their property taxes are going up. And I get it. I totally get it. But we have to build a system where we plan decades out for what we want. and we have to commit to that system and we have to fund it. So I'm definitely excited to be part of anything. I'm excited to be part of anything with you, Matt. I respect you a lot. So thank you for doing all of this work, and thank you, everyone.
Glad these meetings are recorded because Mike has been known to change, Mike's been known to change his mind. Any other folks from the public online who would like to comment? Okay, well, just turning it back over to the committee members and to our guests. We do, and I'm again very conscious of what Stephanie said about wanting some time to think about things. But particularly after having heard from members of the public, just to the extent that folks are comfortable talking about some of these things today, is there anything that you think is worthwhile to add
I have a question.
or ask about? Stephanie?
Yes. Could I ask Jimmy, are you still here? If Jimmy is able to-
I am.
Can you unmute and just talk a little bit about your comment in the box about impacting culture of the building? I'm not
Sure.
quite sure if, thank you.
So when I think we've got to be careful because climate and culture matter. And so and that's for teachers and for students. And so when I became the principal of Mount Pleasant, IB was already in the building, and it was completely run like a school within a school. Everything was separate for them. They didn't intermingle with any of the other students in the building. They moved in their cohort, for lack of a better term, and it was causing nothing major, but it was always like you could hear murmurs of this group talking about that group and that group talking about this group. And so we really worked really hard to break down that model. We didn't get rid of IB, but what we did was we made it that we have a program inside of school, but we're all Green Knights who go to Mount Pleasant. And so we did some things like, for example, the classes that were able to be mixed, like a PE class, an art class, a music class. We had those classes mixed in with because some of our other kids thought, well, oh, those kids think they're special, or you create your own narrative. All the kids in the IB program are these rich kids, and they weren't. They were just as normal as the other kids. But when you had that separate kind of identity of the school within a school, it really did create an opportunity for kids and people to create a narrative because they lacked information. So we worked really hard to break it down, in terms of, and some of our ideas came from our students. One of our students came with mix it up at lunch. And so every lunch you had to sit at a different cafeteria table and bring a friend to a different area because people tend to sit in the same place with the same people. So we worked really hard, and it really changed the culture of our building, but we still had the program in the building. It just got rid of that dynamic. So I struggle with hearing a school within a school while I support the programs that were discussed.
Thanks for that. I think what I heard, again, from one of the presenters was talking about the idea that everyone, if we were doing a school within a school or a program within the school, everyone would benefit from the resources that those students were getting. So, making sure that all the students have the OT and the PT and the executive functioning skills that they were talking about. At a tier 1 level, if you're giving every student the opportunity to get access to those skills, I think that really breaks down, where they're getting something special and we're not getting that. But then everyone benefits from having their red folder or their red binder and having folks remind them, you need your red binder for science class or for whatever. And if everyone's doing the same thing, I think, again, that's one of the challenges that we need to kind of think about. What does it look like to give everyone that basic exposure to some of those ideas, and then bump it up as you need it, but to make it that everybody gets the same that everyone else is getting, so that people don't feel excluded or people don't feel like somebody's getting something special. But again, I need some time to sit with that. I appreciate Jimmy's sharing that story, and for the presenters who are there in the room sharing that idea as well.
The other thing I'll add, Stephanie, and to the group, is that when we think about educational equity, by Webster's definition, it's making sure every student has the resources that they need at the time that they need them. So just giving a student those resources when they're unprepared to accept them can be just as detrimental as well, right? Like I remember, I don't remember what district it was, but they gave every kid in ninth grade an AP class. Well, if you're unready to accept it, they thought that was, and that's called equality versus equity, right? And so we got to be very careful about how we do. We got to make sure folks are ready and prepared to receive it, or it becomes a negative when it was intended to be something positive.
Right. We'd need to kind of scaffold
Correct.
to make sure that they were ready to use that opportunity. I understand what you're saying. Yeah.
I think it's kind of like, and this is my view of how Kingswood is happening with the Montessori. If the families are not at the level where they can accept it, like what's the point, right? So looking into that and not just us saying this is what you need and this is where we think you need to be, and really looking at where our families are and what we need to do to get them to where we're saying is exceptional. And it's going to be a huge gap. So just looking into that. But I had something else to say. What Mr. James was saying too. Hold on, let me think. What I wanted to say was I totally agree, because we do want to just watch our language, and we might even want to think about wording it different, the program different, instead of wording it what we said was in school program.
School within school.
School within a school.
Within school, it does sound kind of offensive, like school within the school. We don't want to create. We kind of don't want to create that bad momentum that we are separating children from each other based on their academics level or anything in that matter. So we might want to look into that. But once again, I do agree. We do have some schools who do a good job integrating and making sure everybody feels included and confident in whatever level that they are. So we might want to look into that. CAB does an okay job. I think my daughter goes there, and I think they do an okay job of everyone being on different levels. But because I think the arts really bring that into balancing that out. You may be academically on this level, but you may still be a dance major with someone else that is on a different level. So that kind of merges it. So we really might want to look into how we make everyone comfortable with whatever level or whatever their situation is as a group in a unit in a safe environment, learning environment.
Yeah, I mean, looking down the road to, if we decided we wanted to make this part of, what we're proposing, I think one of the challenges will be how much we want to say, that certain things have to be components of it. And, how much we want to leave to the discretion of the school and the school district that will actually be trying to set it up. And, because some of it we do have to rely on the folks who are on the ground working with the students every day, for their judgment. But one thing I think is that I've just sort of assumed throughout is that for any of these programs that we're talking about, gifted and talented, or a special program for kids with diagnosed learning disabilities, arts, STEM, whatever, that they be voluntary, that no one, no student or no student's family that's attending the school would be required to have their kid participate in one of these. These would be optional for parents who wanted them. And then, like I said, if they weren't full, that kids from other schools would be able to choice in. But I don't think that with any of these that we're talking about something that kids would be required to do.
And I offer something. I also think that one of the things that happens, we have this happening at Pilot, our mission is to serve kids with learning differences, but we often get siblings who are neurotypical learners who come because their parents see how well their sibling with a learning difference is doing, and so they enroll other children in the family. And I think that when you create as many kind of universal access points for all students around therapeutic offerings, science of reading, informed literacy instruction, and so on for 100% of students, all boats rise. And so then you can, there are plenty of points for everyone to feel like a full and total community. And then there are equally enough opportunities for students to get, more specific targeted interventions that not 100% of the students need, or that you don't have the capacity to serve, 100% of the students at that level. But every student in the program benefits, and so it ends up being a point of attraction for the school in general. And so people are choosing to enroll at the school, maybe not because their child has an IEP or a learning difference that would require direct intervention, but because they know that the quality of instruction is at a higher level because the school has opted into practices that are therapeutically informed, evidence-based, and so on. And so I think it can be a magnet mechanism as well for the school. I agree, the school within a school creates kind of immediate cultural problems. It's like the leadership is gonna have to focus on what do the edges of that school within a school look like, and how do you blur the lines as much as possible. But I think that there are real benefits for the community at large within the school to attract even non-LD families.
And by the way, I'll take the blame for the terminology, because I think I'm the one who brought it up. And the reason I did is that's a term that's used nationally,
Sure.
and it was helpful for us just in terms of trying to
Get out of there, then, Matt.
see what's going on in other states, and but we're not, we're
Let me take
certainly
this
not.
right there, because they agree.
We're not required to use it in any of the stuff that we do. It's just if you're trying to
Sure.
look at what's going on nationally and some of the, the writings and stuff, then that's just the term folks use. Other comments or questions from the committee or guests? Then I will just say that I am very grateful to folks for participating and being engaged, and B, speaking solely for myself, very optimistic that we can figure out a way to move this forward. I'm just one person, but I think that this sounds like potentially a great opportunity. So I'm eager for folks to have some time to think about it, and hopefully be able to come back in 2 weeks and see if others think that it is realistic and practical. And if folks don't have other comments or questions, then we can adjourn.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you again to our guests. I appreciate you being here.
Thanks. Have a good night, everyone.
Take care.
Thank you. We appreciate it. Good night.